Welcome into this edition of the Deepwatch Overwatch Podcast. I'm joined today by a panel of Deepwatch experts, and we're here to talk about our predictions for 2024. Right? It's early in the year. That's one of the things everybody does. We figured why not? So a number of discussions today on what we think is going to happen in 2024, and love to start off with what's your strongest prediction for the year? What's your lock? The thing that you'd bet the farm on. What have you got in terms of the thing is going to happen and you're willing to jump out and talk about? And I think I'm going to let Greg start with this one because I can see the smile on his face. He's got something good.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, right. The thing that I would say I would put my money on and make my bet on would be that we are going to see, you have the things that happen every day, and then you have the things that make national news, and you have things that are globally impacting. I'm going to pick a globally impacting thing. I believe we will see the first poisoning of an AI model, and seeing that's going to be a very interesting discussion that spurns an entire ripple effect in our industry. AI has become real. 2023, we finally saw that. Now it's becoming a part of business processes. It's being integrated into the entire stack. And I know we are all going to select different things. I'm choosing that one because I think that is a 5-year impetus that I think we're going to see in 2024 as a ripple effect.
Interesting. I hadn't even thought about that one personally.
It's not calling your shot, but it's going to happen because we've already seen it, right? I mean, we saw it with the older chat bots that popped up and how quickly the internet poisoned those. And what did you expect to get out of it, or where were things going to go? And now it's come down to also who's going to vet? How do you trust those things?
Mm-hmm. And are you building your entire business on an ML AI platform that has some kind of data poisoning involved in it? How will you ever know? How will you know that the business that you're building and the products that you're building are built on data that can be trusted? Very, very difficult space. But I think the conversation here is going to get very interesting. And so that would be one that I would put my money on. 2024, I think, is going to be very interesting at the AI and ML layer.
One for me is I think a lot of the attacks, seeing the success last year at attacking the people more so in a security program, like getting credentials reset that shouldn't have been, getting tokens reset that shouldn't have been. I think we're going to see a lot more social engineering style attacks, a lot of phone calls, frankly, to the help desk, because that really seems to be very, very squishy at this point. Because I think part of what they're really doing now is they're going at your security infrastructure, whether it's the technology or the people. They're going straight at attacking that, because once they've attacked that, they've done two things. They've gotten in, and they've also started to turn off the things that would tell you they've gotten in. I think we're going to see that as an attack profile, attack vector, if you will, here in 2024 a lot more than we have.
So authentication vector attack part 2.
Absolutely, because we've seen two of the biggest breaches last year were successfully done that way. I think AI is going to make that even worse, right? Because it's going to be easier to impersonate a real person. It's going to be easier to make it seem like that's a legit request coming in, and it's going to be harder for the people to figure out that it isn't. We already know that that's sometimes we go back and forth between our people one of the best parts of our security program, or have we spent too much time and effort on technology and we've forgotten people, how important people are and training and process are. And I think we're kind of coming back to that dip again, where the people are the susceptible part. I think AI is going to help make that even tougher.
Would you allow me to double down on your bet? I think that's a safe one. I think that's absolutely something we're going to see as well, especially because it's the seems to be the path of least resistance to the keys to the kingdom in a lot of these companies. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of good sense.
Well, I mean, you guys are getting very techie and cute over here, and I don't know if that's so much my
I'll take cute
expertise.
Bill's techie on that one.
But I think to go in the absolute opposite direction, but still keeping this in mind, I think AI offers a huge influx of ambiguous data points. So as we continually think about or talk about, waste time talking about whether or not a SIEM is dead, is a SIM dead, or is it now more alive than it ever was because a singular point for data aggregation and a pane of glass, especially with an influx in ambiguous data points, is the SIM reborn or is it dead? And I do think there are going to be a lot of board level conversations and CISO peer-to-peer conversations, a lot of money wasted on consultants to continually have this cyclical conversation. Consult all you want. Let's spend the money. Let's have these conversations. There's no plan of execution on killing the SIM. So I do think that there needs to be a renewed focus. I don't think it'll happen this year. I think this year there will be a lot of time wasted on this conversation. I think you'll see in what year is it? 2025. You'll start to see better plans of how you're going to execute a healthy SIM, what data you're looking at.
Also
and
sounds
why.
like you're providing an implication that says that the value of the security data is finally going to be partially realized for the business as a whole.
I don't know if it will be partially realized, to your point, but so I want to start off by saying that you took my first one,
Sorry.
you took my second one, and you're around where I was going to go.
And you meant to say, like, and you've so far said the smartest
And
thing.
you absolutely, well, that's because I think you said
Okay.
the most impactful thing, which is AI ML is obviously going to be the number one thing that's out there. Social engineering is 100% going to become more effective and more capable because of AI ML helping making it better, right? Some other stuff we've been talking about. But I think it goes to your 2 points on the data that we've been looking at, the money and the budgets that we've been putting together and spending are finally starting to get some, not necessarily constriction, but they're starting to be evaluated at a very, very high level. And there is an expectation this year that AI ML is going to reduce some of that constriction on the budgets. It's going to ease up things, make things easier from a costing perspective. It's my personal prediction that not really for this year, but really for 2025, Sam, to go off what you were saying, is that budgets are going to change again next year because we think we're going to see a lot of savings across the board this year. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to expose a lot of, we are still going to need these things as we're charting this next transformation. And to your point, the evaluation of the data, what we see coming out of it is going to drive towards that.
Do you think it'll also drive consolidation in the space?
I think it has to.
I think that's really the net impetus is that we're actually seeing that the business is now evaluating the cost of the security data, and in the evaluation of the cost of the security data and the aggregation of all of that is starting to realize, oh my goodness, the treasure trove of value for the rest of the business is starting to be realized as well. And I think there's a fundamental shift in the discussion of the spend on security data as a primary security function. And I think the data shift is a business function. I think to what you're getting at, you're not going to see that as an event. I think you'll see that as an economic shift in the space in 2024 as spend becomes a little bit tightened, budgets become tightened, CISO board scrutiny becomes more prevalent. I think all of that is a net effect on what we're going to see in the space.
Yeah.
But it'll drive very, very interesting, SIM to data lake to data strategy discussions that are a little bit different than we've had in the past.
And to sum it up, I think we have an expectation that we are going to see a net savings due to new technologies this year. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen.
So, you guys are segueing into one of the other topics we definitely wanted to talk about is what are we seeing? What are our buying predictions in cybersecurity for 2024? I'm hearing a fallacy that we can buy some of these tools and lower our costs. I'm hearing arguments that's going to happen at the board level about where do we get our trusted data from? Do we still do it from a SIM? Do we have to do it from somewhere else? Do we just trust all the data everywhere anyway? What do we think? How is that going to impact the way budget is spent on new solutions in cybersecurity this year?
So instead of like the doom and gloom that we've been going down so far?
I think it's a good transfer to doom and gloom of how much it's going to cost you to secure in 2024. I think I'll go first. I think ransomware spend is going to increase significantly on preparation for ransomware events. And I think that it's going to be handled a little bit differently. I think the preparation is the way it's going to be handled differently, getting ahead of it, the reactive nature of the ransomware malware side of the business is something that has kept us on our heels for a while. And I think you're going to see a transfer of that strategy to an active spend I think that's one that I'll call out. I also think that if we're smart, we're starting to look at the way in which AI is doing attack structures. And I think I'll take the, what did you say, cute and smart? I'll take the cute and smart approach here and go with, the ransomware spend is smart. I think what's cute is to consider the AI attack vectors on executives. The level of quality that we are seeing in the deepfake space is getting interesting. And I think, these are one-off. There's going to be, statistically, these are not volumetrically large attack vectors, but they are the most interesting. And I think you're going to see one of those as well this year, especially in a very large publicly traded company. I think you'll see some of that kind of stuff come to the top. Now, unfortunately, you won't see that in the stock price valuation change because we've learned that over the last couple of years. What I really think you see is the conscious shift of executives to their identity, to their data, to the way in which they handle. I think there's an executive shift that's still available to this space.
So, other buying thoughts?
I don't even know what you just said, but it reminded me of cell phone plans. I think you're saying, will they spend less or will they spend more? Listen, consolidation or buying additional platforms to save money, it's contradictory. I bought something to save. Like, I don't know what your cell carrier is, but mine's Verizon. And they call me hey, we're going to save you money. Sign up for this and pay us less.
Is this an episode of Cybersecurity Math?
It's just, girl math.
Yeah.
It's girl math. You should hashtag this podcast girl math. You probably get a lot of hits.
Sure. Okay.
Mark the tape.
But like, let's be honest. What vendor is like, I'm going to help you spend less money with me? None. Zero. That's not long-term reality.
No.
So yes, you're going to spend more money today with the promise of spending less. Over time, you're going to spend more.
I think we're also this year going to see the big IT platform consolidation fitting into cybersecurity consolidation more as well, right? I mean, let's face it, the Microsofts of the world, they've had their on-prem software forever. They've started trying to provide security content for that. They've got cloud. They're starting to provide security content for that. They're now a SIEM option and they're bundling all of that, at least in part. I think we're seeing more from AWS on that front. I think we're seeing more from Google on that front. I think we're seeing that the cybersecurity tool spend is getting co-opted into IT tool spend, and best of breed is going to be harder and harder to justify when your board is telling you we're going to try to spend less. Oh, by the way, I forgot who did this, but at the end of last year, at the end of 2023. There were some surveys out suggesting that 50% of cybersecurity teams are expecting to spend less money this year because they're expecting their budget to be lower. And I think that's in part because of the buy all the stuff from us, whether we're, again, Microsoft, Palo Alto, whoever, buy all the stuff from us, Cisco, and just have this one ecosystem. Best of breed is not going to work in your budget anymore.
I think we've all been in cybersecurity long enough this is probably the third time we've seen this, right? There's always some sort of compelling event or reason why you move from separate products to a platform play, right? And talk to me, let's do this podcast again in 2029 and we'll talk about how nobody wants, a single throat to choke. They want to diversify.
I think it'll happen a lot faster than that. Too.
Yeah,
I don't think we need to wait till 2029 for that.
We want to talk about predictions.
Yeah.
Okay, what's going to be the what's going to be the thing that makes everybody say no more platforms? Because right now we're in the no platform, what single throat to choke season. It'll turn.
Every economic buyer loves the scenario of an E5 license and the distribution of that and the strategy of taking that to the board. And I think that what you're saying is the kind of that reasoning. And it's good reasoning. That reasoning is spreading to a lot of other product companies and emulating that in the space, and it becomes very sticky.
Oh yeah. I mean, even if you look at it, like Sam, to your point, like this is another turning on that. Of we've seen this with the McAfees, we've seen this with the Cisco's, we've seen this with the Microsofts. Like we're constantly seeing kind of a bubble up. Lots of good, innovative technology in the cybersecurity space that flows out from that, little nits and pieces of things that are really, really cool and do a somewhat of a good job or provide a understandable value. then those get acquired and sucked in a standard merger and acquisition cycle to yet another rollout happens. And I think you're exactly right. We're
Seen the movie a couple
right,
times.
once or twice. The credits. Hopefully, we're getting better in credit scenes this time. But
That's right.
So we didn't necessarily in 2023 see the mergers and acquisitions that I think a lot of us might have thought were going to happen. However, 2023 was the year of survival for a lot of companies, and the change of margin structures and the consideration of what business used to be and now what margin structures are. And so what I'm getting at here is that I think you have seen valuation structures recede in some of the cybersecurity space. And I think now you've got really pretty price points for consolidation, mergers and acquisitions. I do believe we will see some very interesting spend. And there's a lot of cash sitting on the balance sheet out there in some of the major tech and cybersecurity companies. And so picking up large scale customer bases, net new technologies, certainly net new teammates, but most importantly, I believe that this is going to be fundamentally built on the need for more and more data on customers. So the cybersecurity companies that are aggregating the most amount of data are going to see a valuation expansion because that data is becoming more and more valuable across all of the other service lines these existing large behemoths have. So long story short, valuations have receded. I think you will see an attractive market to go out and take balance sheet, move it into an acquisition and expand really your ability to take SKUs to market. You're going to see a lot of that this year.
That makes me think of, obviously the most important thing we have is our information, right? It's like that is our context, our intelligence, like what makes us from a security perspective, from a human perspective, whatever it may be. Not to be super philosophical about that, but the question I want to get into on that is: should CISOs start thinking about data portability? Right? If I have all of this information that's been gathered for me and is providing value to these large platform plays on their balance sheets, and I decide that I need to move to a different platform, what part of that do I get to take with me? Or is it always going to be a net new start over? I think that's something else to keep in mind as we look at this year moving forward is when we talk about security, it's not just owning your alerts. It's not just owning your individual pieces. It's what did you do? How did you do it? What's those things that made your team work well or that your team failed on? And if those are all being collected by an entity for ML conversations, how do you take some of that with you? What is the transferability of those pieces?
So let's peel that back for a second. Is the question or the discussion to be had a portability discussion, or is it an ownership discussion, right? If you own your data but can't bring it anywhere, is that the same risk as not owning your data but having the opportunity to bring it somewhere?
I think you're on point, because the question becomes, I can own it, so I've declared sovereignty over it, like it's mine. But if I can't do anything with it, why do I even need to own it? Right. So
that's right.
Right. So
it's a two-part little conversation.
And the cost of ownership is a very interesting kind of part of this discussion as well.
So one of the other topics we wanted to make sure we covered, though, is what are some key things, predictions, not predictions, just good advice that we think CISOs need to be paying attention to in 2024. I think as a group, we've talked internally a little bit about sort of 4 Ps, and that's one that maybe we ought to talk about. What are some of the things we want to suggest CISOs are paying the most attention to here in 2024?
Well, first off, what are the 4 Ps? Like, I'll let Greg answer that one first.
Yeah, it might be a Deepwatch internal thing, or we discussed the 4 Ps as really, prevalence is another P, but it's the things that
keep
are
it to 4.
It's the things that are blocking and tackling, the basics. The things that win the game are sometimes the basics. In this case, the 4 Ps, the prevalent 4 Ps are passwords, phishing, patching, and people. People being the social engineering aspects that we're seeing. And so, I think I'd serve this back up to the group as a discussion. Which one do we want to start with first? Because the basics are sometimes being forgotten.
Patching is one of the easiest ones to just jump right in with, right? We know that we're 2 years in to Log4j. We announced Log4j was announced as a major vulnerability of the world literally just over 2 years ago, and we still have 38% of internet-facing instances of Log4j are still vulnerable.
Makes you want to cry.
Oh,
Dun-dun-dun. Now
Oh.
that's where we need the sound
Wowie,
effect.
kazowie.
100%. Yeah.
Sorry, Marcus.
Yeah.
So yes, makes me want to cry. We've not. God, train of thought just went,
killed it.
Train of
Yeah.
thought.
Wait over, yeah, right over there.
Like Mariah in the wind, it just blew things through.
An oldie but a goodie.
These are actually really good keeper
No,
clips
this
right
this
here.
is working. This is working. But yeah, I mean, patching has been one of the toughest things. I mean, I would love to see the software vendors have more skin in the game on patching. It really does seem like, oh, you bought our stuff. That's great. It's your responsibility to keep it working. Well, really? I mean, even my Toyota has a 10-year, drivetrain warranty or whatever. It's my job to keep it working properly. Your software.
You drive a Tesla. I don't have a
Hey, look,
Toyota.
it was those fall apart though, so I wanted a reliable.
Well, Sam, he does until the cold sucks all the battery out of the airport in Chicago this week.
I checked; it's still at 46%.
Okay.
But at any rate, yeah, I mean, I think we've put everybody in a position though where patching may be a basic, but the sheer volume of patching is just ridiculous.
I think I want to lean into patching as well a little bit, and it's more on, to your point, of the sheer volume that's out there.
Agreed.
And we as a industry, and we can always talk about shadow IT, or we can talk about other things that are being popped up that as a CISO or as any form of security leader or an IT leader, like, you don't know what's happening in the background, you're going to get slapped upside the head. Like, that's how it works. So I would want to move away from the ownership of saying who would be responsible for running the patching, whether it's an internal or external. I don't really care. It just has to be done. The question starts to roll into the prioritization of those things.
Who
and
patches the best?
and the locations of them.
When you think of patching, what comes to mind? Who does this the best? Is it emulatable?
I mean, look, I never have to think about, is my Roku secure or not? It's auto updating itself.
I personally think Apple. Unannounced updates all the time, but Apple.
Remember when they dropped that the U2 album on your phone? That was unannounced.
yeah,
too.
that is a form of
Thanks,
patching that was
Apple.
completely uncalled
Yeah.
for.
Talk
Right,
about
yeah.
talk about just dropping.
Well, I mean,
on
I
your
think
phone.
that is a
Sam
good
wanted
point,
a
though,
YouTube
of,
patch.
like, what happens to business processes or other operations on, for example, I like YouTube, but I did not like that album. I didn't want that added to my list. I don't need that patch put into
I blamed my
business
boyfriend at the
process.
time for like a year. Like, why did you download this U2 album on my phone? Why were you touching my phone?
Wasn't that one of Cook or Steve Jobs' last things that he did? Was like part of that contract, I think.
And for a year, he's like, "What are you talking about?
But
Don't act like you
So
don't know."
so moving on beyond the
I
music
do-
critic
it is-
portion of the show.
Sorry.
it is understanding the risk and criticality and why Octung Baby was probably one of their best songs.
But that's one of those items, right? What are the others that are getting short shrift right now that we want to help CISOs think about a little bit more?
Can I pose a question? I wrote it down so I didn't forget. That's how awful I focus. So you started the whole 4P conversation about getting the basics right and getting back to the basics. So my question is, are the basics ignored, or are they just not evangelized? Are we assuming people aren't doing the basics right because they're not talking about the basics? When I say people, I really mean CISOs, right? That's what we're talking about. And are they not evangelizing it? Because if you're a CISO and you're going to go into a board meeting with non-technical stakeholders, most times,
Correct.
is the first thing you're going to say, like, do you guys know how well I do the basic stuff?
No, but wouldn't that be
Right.
refreshing to hear?
Yeah, for me, yes.
Yeah. For a board, yes.
non-technical CEO, maybe not. I don't know.
Well,
Are
there's
we
like
assuming?
Well, there's like the bell
Isn't it-
curve. You're
but
talking about the
isn't it-
bell curve of innovation that
Isn't
people
it
want to talk about.
sexier when you're paying these folks hundreds of thousands of dollars and giving them a fair stake of equity in your company to be worth their time? That you want to, non-technical you wants to hear like AI, ML, don't know what it stands
Oh.
for, but tell me how you do that. And you're like, no. The basics though, those
So-
are
so
very
I always-
sexy. I don't know. Is it being ignored or just not evangelized?
I mean, I think
Deprioritize because of its attraction factor.
I think that it's not ignored and it's not deprioritized. It's both. It's just we don't have a great way of, hey, just so that everyone's aware. I got up this morning. My coffee was good. I was able to sit down in this comfortable chair. I found a good spot. Like, no one cares.
Right, but
Right,
like,
but-
so
but-
same
but-
thing
but
at the board
that-
level,
that's the
like, cool
basics.
story, pal.
Right.
But
But
on the other
we
hand-
have to figure out how to make that more interesting at that level. Like,
But,
you're 100%
I mean-
right. Like but it is, in my opinion, it's a combination of
What would make
Mm.
patching more attractive as a discussion factor for the boardroom? Is it the metrics? Is it the effectiveness? Is it the ability to sleep? All
See,
those
I'm
things have
gonna
been devalued.
argue that it can't be about it being sexy. Let's use finance as a parallel. The fact that we paid all our bills this week on time, does that show up at a board meeting?
Yes.
God, I hope not, because that should just be one of the basic things that gets done. The
Shows up at a board
inability,
meeting because the board members showed up. They got paid. Yes.
right? But I
Yes.
mean, yes, it's the stuff that
That's a good point.
shouldn't make it into the conversation anyway. But we have the evidence that it doesn't work. We have I called up your help desk and your people didn't know that when resetting my password, maybe they shouldn't have also reset my multi-factor token at the exact same time without following the right process to validate I'm really me. We know that 38% of a 2-year-old vulnerability haven't been patched and are accessible on the internet. We can tell all of those things from the evidence and from the reporting that it's not getting done. So I would even turn that a little bit to say, why is it that accounting seems to be able to do the things that they do that are the base things of getting money in, getting money out, and processing the stuff, and information security, somehow we're still talking about it today? Those are the table stakes things.
I'll tell you,
patching that stuff.
that is a silencer of a question.
It's I mean it speaks to the
Silence.
maturity,
I mean-
unfortunately.
I mean, you can look at it and say, okay, finance is less complex. No, it's not.
No.
it's not.
No, it's not. Right? Is it based off of, it's red and black. It's your ledgers, right? It's what you put in and what you get out. Like as long as I can go to the board from a financial standpoint and say that I am currently in the black as it applies towards margin, as it applies towards profit, as it applies towards revenue, fantastic. How do we take that and apply that to security? I think is ultimately where you're going on that. And how can we, as experienced folks in security, walk through and say at a business level, I have spent the money well, and that we're doing those small things. Is it a ledger? Is it a, we've heard lots of people go through and all of us have been in the field for a long time.
Too long.
How,
Yes.
is it, who hasn't heard, give me a scorecard. I want an A/B rating. I need a numeric number, like give me something to grade myself with. And I would say that's really what I would ask CISOs to get out of this particular part of the conversation is ultimately right now, there is no right answer. There is no specific tool that is the industry standard that says, do this and you can prove to your board that you have done the basics well, but work to come up with the way that you want to have that communication done. Like what is going to be your standard, not just at your company, but potentially as part of your capability and your brand of this is how I'm going to judge these things and this is how I'm going to communicate them. And when you come up with a great idea, please let us know. We'd like to help you with it. Right?
Please share.
Yeah.
You're almost talking about an SLA function from a board to an officer in the security space, and or some kind of accompanying blockchain component to track whether or not it's been done.
Hold
That's
on.
what you
Can
just
get
painted
another,
for me.
Can you get another security specific reference in there?
Yes, it's a
Um,
ledger that's
Fantastic.
not a ledger.
Okay. Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. What are we alleging? Sorry. no.
I think it's a very interesting conversation because it's what's been hard for cyber so long, which is the financial impact and using financial impact to prioritize effort. I think it's very, very hard to do. But also that financial prioritization of effort also becomes financial risk when it's not activated on. And I just think we may not have a really good way of tracking this yet. And the larger the enterprise, the harder it is to track. So your spread, your sprawl, your multinational corporations, that's a very difficult undertaking. So complexity, I think, is our enemy in this regard. So what can we do to reduce the complexity and improve timelines?
Okay, so we've gone
That will
from
help.
patching to Bitcoin security ledgers.
No, I didn't say
and
Bitcoin.
wallets.
No.
Yeah.
I said
There is
blockchain.
a P in complexity.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. I said blockchain, and you guys heard crypto. No, I mean
But-
blockchain. I mean
yeah.
tracking this as a part of having. You said ledger.
I get you.
A
I get you.
financial
Yeah, yeah.
ledger in an action-based environment. Blockchain is made for this kind of thing.
That's fair. It's a good call
And
out.
maybe worthy of looking at, thinking outside of the box, like this kind of discussion. It warrants thinking differently, because what we're doing is not working.
Agreed.
So
Agreed.
my point is we got to move from patching to we have other P's to discuss.
Well, yeah. So
Send
was-
a phishing email. We'll open it.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. As people involved in those things. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've touched on the phishing a little bit already. We're concerned that AI, especially large language model and the capabilities there, are going to make it hard to tell, especially spear phishing, especially business email compromise style phishing, and phishing. I mean, there's just, we can talk about the SMS and all the other stuff. Yeah, that one is continuing to be a great entry in the phone phishing that gets people in.
Yeah.
Still a big one. And I will also argue, of course, that if this is suddenly a concern and you're suddenly now worried about it because of AI ML, I think you probably need to look back at the fact that maybe you weren't going to be very good at it last year or the year before
anyways.
either, before that showed up, right?
Yeah.
We've got a great reason to talk about it, that AI is going to make it harder. But again, as that's one of those basics, hopefully that's something you've been doing a decent job against, and you're just going to need to up your game a bit more.
Is up just to naturally lead in, is upping your game a people scenario these days, or is it something else?
A combination? I don't know. It gets complex. I don't know. That's complex.
Yes. It depends, Sam. It always depends.
Well, I think it's we know that technology isn't the answer ever. We know that a large part of what would make some of these phishing things harder is people who can remember and follow a security process. Okay, I've been asked to do a thing. This isn't the channel we use for doing that thing. How am I going to validate and verify it in an appropriate way? And in many cases, maybe we haven't thought about what is that process to instruct our people to do. We're just relying on them to be SMRT smart and come up with, a way to validate, hey, maybe I should call that person and talk to them. Maybe I should bring this to my manager and let's make sure we both agree we're going to do it, or those other steps, versus just rotely doing what you get asked to do because that's the path of least resistance in your job already.
I'm wondering if there's not enough healthy paranoia in the phishing space yet. I'm wondering if it's just a conversation topic, but not something that actually has a net effect to your career. It's usually an impact on the business. It's not an impact on the individual usually. I'm not sure that the accountability has met the individual yet in this space. And I think that's a part of why the paranoia has not been improved.
So to move it along a little bit as well, because I think we hit something important on that when we're talking about from a people perspective. How are you communicating these things internally? How are you walking through those pieces? We are seeing a lot of regulatory changes coming down the pipe, or we've seen just recently evidence of some people that we were all pretty much aware of got a very interesting piece of news from the SEC. Maybe,
Yeah, and case law has developed quite a bit in this space as well in the last 24 months.
The point I'm trying to get to on that is not to beat around the bush. What if we're saying people are how we're going to communicate these things, and we want to start setting some of these basics and ideas, and we have additional regulations that we believe are not necessarily coming down the pipe net new, but are going to be enforced more. What, as a security leader, should we be focusing on communicating now or expecting from those regulations that we would want to make sure that our boards are aware of, that our teams are aware of, that effectively, as of the end of last year, there is a new sheriff in town. What do we want to talk about or show to go off of that?
Can we condense that question? I think it's a heck of a question. Can we condense that down to maybe the SEC?
Sure.
Well, sounds
Start
good.
maybe
Sounds
there?
good.
Yeah.
So what's the regulation say, right? Is it 4 days now?
It is now,
We're-
yes, 4
we're up
days
to a
from the
4-day
time
timeline.
from the time you determine you've had a material incident.
And technically, if you don't report, someone who breached you may actually do that for you.
And get you into all sorts of extra trouble there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, for me, one of the biggest things is if I'm a CISO, I now have to think about, am I serving the company by not pointing out some of the major issues that we have, and by going along with what IT is attempting to do and what the business goal is of deploying into this new cloud XYZ or new solution ABC. Am I having to realize that I don't have enough knowledge of some of the again, shadow IT things that are going on?
Mhm.
I have to scream loudly to the board that I need to know about this stuff because I'm going to be held liable for it, whether I like it or not. I think some of those things I have to now get the discussion going even more urgently with the entire company about, I'm on the hot seat for this. If I don't know about it, some of that risk is probably going to transfer to you. Would you like me to own this risk? If so, read me in and let's talk about how we're taking care of it.
I think for the CISO who has read the regulatory implications and has internalized them, it's quite a set of tools to be able to bring to the boardroom to have a different kind of conversation. And I think you nailed it. So how is the modern CISO, given the net new regulations, going to propose to the board the mitigation of risk, the transfer of risk, and who the heck is going to accept the risk?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a part of the power that's been wielded now with this new set of, specifically for publicly traded companies, of
Yes.
course, right? It's an SEC regulatory environment.
To your point about non-SEC regulated orgs, we've also over the past 3 years or so really expanded the definition of critical infrastructure in the United
Yeah.
States, and
We needed to.
and the administrations over that time have also said, okay, here are requirements that you now have. You're right, you're not reporting to the SEC. A lot of the requirements are relatively similar. There's difference here, difference there, but you now have a bunch of requirements as critical infrastructure, whether you're private or publicly owned, that you now have to apply. And I hate that there's this regulation over here and that regulation over here. I wish we were a little bit more. I wish everybody was playing from the same set of rules. It would make life a lot easier for me, for any cybersecurity professional to understand a little bit more about, here's what I need to worry about with this company, and guess what, I need to worry about a lot of the same things with that company. The nuances can be more about business and less about regulation on some of that. Standard bad day protocol has been minimize, deny, and let the truth come out slowly and try to control it, right? I mean, that's PR, that's everything. That's not just cybersecurity. We're now, through the SEC, forcing people to be a bit more upfront about it.
Mhm.
You got to tell us it was this big, because the word material means something important, right?
Yes.
If it was really only this small, you can't tell me it was material, but it was only 5 customers that got affected. Okay, that's not material. That's 5 customers, right? Out of thousands or whatever your case may be. So I think that's a direct reason why the SEC was doing it, was because, there was a cybersecurity incident. Oh, there was a little bit of data got lost. All of the minimizing that had been going on, sure, fine, you can still minimize in that first report at least a little, but you are at least admitting it's material up front.
We have these SEC filings. We have these regulations that are coming out. We've been pushing towards this, and the change in the way that we have to go from the 7 days to 4 days and the concept of material. Are we moving more towards more of a crisis management style announcement and review of incidents or breaches? And is, in our opinion, I'm going to say our, but really mine, at least at this point before we throw it across, are we doing that because of the interconnectedness of the internet these days, and the way that we've seen a breach occur in one place and it dramatically impact other systems or other members or even things that we didn't even, the companies didn't even think about? Like, we've seen lots of evidence of that. So I think it would be an interesting topic real quick to kind of end up on is, are these regulations hitting at the right time? And as a security leader, as a CISO, are these things that we should be taking into account because of, we need to be notifying, because we may be, even if we don't think about it, impacting one of our business partners or one of our customers?
The interconnected weaving of all of these systems has become very interesting. And I think maybe SolarWinds really, I speak personally, SolarWinds very much opened my eyes to the sprawl and spread of these types of systems and the interconnectedness of them. We knew that, but I think numerically, certainly metrically, and definitely, as we look at the impetus of that particular attack and what was seen, that was just far and wide. And to what you're getting at here in the rules and regulations piece is that a lot of these companies have grown so far and wide. And when something bad happens, the undiscovered massive amounts of destruction are not necessarily being calculated. And so maybe this regulation takes us closer toward risk calculus. And especially for these companies that have sprawled and spread into, in this case, it was the government, right?
Mhm.
The majority of it was the government. These things have to be identified. And I think this maybe gives us a chance to look at identifying and thinking a little bit differently. I think it's healthy. I do think sometimes it's viewed as an annoyance, but I do think it's healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, to kind of sum it up a little bit on that one, as a security leader and trying to look at, hey, I need to, as we've talked about, the people process, the patching,
Yeah.
the
basics.
password scenarios, the basics of what we're looking at. It's come back down to, can I manage and control and communicate the state of my own house? But I do need to be looking out the window
Yes.
and thinking about my business partners, thinking about the interconnectedness of my own business, and how can I reassure my board and keep my budgets moving forward, but also be a good public citizen, right? Like making sure that we're handling things appropriately, because ultimately, as a business, your best currency is your reputation. And if your reputation is on playing fast and loose with your partner networks or your own capabilities, it's a detriment to the business.
Yeah, I think some of the CISOs that we've talked to in the last 20 years or so, I mean, certainly in the last 10, the ones that are very conscious about third party risk and at this point, fourth party risk, I think are ones that to me stand out as leaders in our space. They're thinking the chessboard all the way out. And I very much enjoy talking with CISOs who want to have this conversation. But I think it's a psychology about understanding how far your risk extends.
And on that note, I think Bill, you
Yeah,
wanna-
exactly. Want to thank everybody who's participated today. Thanks for joining us. This was our 2024 predictions and commentary. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.